You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, Friday Sports Show. We have a wide variety of guests on the show. We have featured some of the world's leading experts in their field, from sports to psychology to many other areas. Today we've got a fascinating guest that's going to give us a bit of an insight into UK adults postpone major life milestones to get on the property ladder. So we'll find out more information about that and about research. So Saira Khan, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a bit more about the research, please? What's happening in terms of postponing major milestones to get on the property ladder?
Yes, this is a very, very interesting piece of research from the Yorkshire Building Society, who are looking at the sacrifices first-time buyers are actually having to make in order to get their foot on that first-time buying ladder. I think a lot of us are quite divorced from that because we've got our own homes and we don't have to go into that whole minefield. But if you're on that first-time buying property ladder, you are sacrificing things like your education. Can you afford to go to university, come out with a £60,000, £70,000 debt, and then pay that off whilst renting and then saving up to buy a deposit? Oh, quite difficult. Also, not getting married or paying for a big lavish wedding, not being able to afford holidays, and we're not even talking luxury, we're just talking a basic holiday. Delaying having children, which really, when you put it all together, has a huge impact on our society. As a parent, if my kids can't afford to move out of the house, it means that my situation and my life has to be delayed a little bit as well. When you look at the average deposit that people are having to save for, if you're living outside of London, you're looking at around £32,000. It rises to just over £44,000 in London. And if you are a parent that wants to help your children pay a little bit of money towards their deposit, then be prepared to fork out just over £18,000. These are big numbers, and the days of cheap credit has gone, and now you are expected to show 6 to 8 times your salary before you are given a mortgage, which are, these are that every decade or every generation, is difficult to buy a house, but it just feels it's really, really hard at the moment with the cost of living and wages not going up. It's tough.
You made some really interesting points there, and not to mention getting the money for a deposit as well. I mean, that in itself for a lot of people, with the sort of cost of living, sort of putting money to one side isn't easy. Would you agree with that, Sarah? For a lot of people, it'd be difficult to.
That's right. And even with the sacrifices that you're making, if you are renting and you want to save, I've been in that situation. It's really hard. And then you have to sort of think, how much of your life are you willing to give up? How many times are you not willing to go out with your mates? How many times are you not willing to kind of treat yourself? How many times, and it's a daily occurrence if you really want to save up. It's kind of, I'm not saying it's impossible, because people are doing it right now as we speak. I spoke to quite a few first-time buyers last week. They're making it happen. But you know what? It has a toll on their mental health. And they really are, they are making those sacrifices, and it's really difficult. And it has an impact on their every single day life. Choices that I didn't have to make. I didn't have to make a decision between education or putting my deposit down for a mortgage. I had the two. People don't have that luxury anymore, and that's the thing. It's very, very difficult and different times. But on saying that, human beings adapt, and you have to adapt and be flexible and be willing to sacrifice if you want to get on the property ladder nowadays.
So, literally they're being faced with making sort of big decisions, whether they postpone things like education, maybe wedding, or like holiday. And there are, you could call them sacrifices, I guess, that people need to make. But in terms of the sort of choice, how do you sort of see that going? So, like in people making choices, you've mentioned there some people are doing that. Yeah.
This is a really interesting question. And again, because of this research, it makes you think, We have had decades of cheap credit, and the impact that had on society, I personally think, was we became a real throwaway culture. We wanted everything because we could, because it was cheap. We didn't really value the cost of things. We had loads of fast fashion, and it had a real detrimental and negative effect, I think, upon society, upon individuals, but also on our environment. I think now, because things are expensive, it makes us think twice about our behaviour, and it makes us really appreciate the effort we're putting into work and the amount of money that we make and what we do with our money. And I think they are not bad things for our society. I think that I come from a generation which was, don't spend your money silly. If you've got 2p, spend 2p, don't spend more. Take a cup of coffee out rather than buying one, you save money. And it was make do without, and be quite frugal. I think we're going back to those traditional values. And I think as a result of that, I think we're going to have a better impact on our society and culture long term. And I think this is the generation that will pass those values on, because I think there was a big chunk in the middle where it got lost and we just became greedy and had everything and wanted everything, and we just completely lost sight of what we're about.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because I suppose on the other side of things, people who do rent home, for example, maybe psychologically in their own mind, they're thinking, okay, if I'm renting a property, I'm paying that money to somebody else so I could make inroads for my own. Is that sort of a psychological? Because some places around the world, Saira, they're happy to rent. I mean,
yes. Yes, and I think this is the difference. I mean, I know in Europe, the culture of renting is absolutely part of society, and as a result, the long leases and the clause that they have protect the tenants. I think in this country, we are a nation of home owners, and so the leases do not reflect the security required by the tenants, and that's why most people want to get out of rented accommodation, buy their own house, because it's a peace of mind, it's security, and also for many of us, a lot of our sort of future wealth or future kind of assets are tied in with our home. So it's a very different scenario between Europe and ourselves and the rest of the world probably, but we are a nation of homeowners, and we will sacrifice what it takes, and people are right now doing that to get that first property and get on the ladder.
That's a really interesting point that I didn't sort of consider really in terms of the differences in renting, because we do know that obviously some countries do rent, but obviously yourself putting it that way in terms of sort of leasing and other implications as well, kind of makes sense. And I suppose I mean there are difficulties. I suppose not only in the UK, a lot of countries around the world, pretty much everywhere these days is everyone's got their own challenges, but from this perspective, what are your thoughts in terms of sort of going forward? Is there sort of hope is there sort of optimism for people to think, okay, well, we can do it? You talked about values and the way, I mean, you look back to say 10 years ago or so, probably even less, programs about buying second homes, holiday homes, and that's kind of sort of gone now.
Yeah.
The idea that these sort of luxuries we kind of took for granted. Is it a question, do you think, of, okay, let's sort of manage your expectations now and sort of, really think about what the priorities are in life?
Jim, you hit the nail on the head. Manage your expectations. And I think this is that you have to go in with that mindset. I think there's a lot of information, and there is a lot of help out there. You've got mortgage advisors, you've got the banks, you've got building societies, you've got the government loan schemes, which are quite generous. You've got different ways of saving your money, moving it around. So you have to be really savvy. That's the first thing, is get the help, understand the information, understand what you can do, get the figures down on paper, break it down, relate it to your income, and then, you know what, it may have to be things like, well, I need to get another job, or I need to take another job on, and then work out the sort of sacrifices that you have to make, and be realistic. You may not be able to have a holiday for 3 years. that doesn't mean you can't relax and have a good time. It just means you're going to have to do it in a different way. You are going to have to become more resourceful and think about how you spend your money on food and clothes, etc., going out, drinking, all that sort of stuff. And so it's just about cutting your cloth to that situation and making sure that your expectations are real. And if your expectations are real, there is every chance that you will be able to buy that property, even despite the fact that the environment is not that helpful right now. Because in this country, one thing I will say is that if you have a will, you will find a way, and there will be ways that you can make that objective and dream or goal come true.
Yeah, that's a really great point, I think, Saira. And I think sometimes people, I suppose sometimes people sort of criticise, and this country, and it has its faults like everywhere else. But I think one thing for sure over here, if you're willing to sort of work hard, you can get there. I suppose the only thing I would say is that, without sort of generalising, there is a sort of generation that probably isn't, not everybody of that generation, but there's a lot of people of that generation probably isn't sort of used to what sort of we're heading into, like in terms of, for me, sort of growing up from a generalisation point of view, it was tough. It wasn't easy financially, but I'm wondering if people these days who've got used to a certain way of living, who are going to be willing to roll their sleeves up, really. That's the big question, to be fair, but time will tell. And if people want more information in terms of the research or anything else, can they signpost them anywhere, please? Sarah, anywhere?
Yes, absolutely, Jim. And you made some really brilliant points, and I wish I could talk for hours and hours. But yes, please go to the Yorkshire Building Society website, which is ybs.co.uk, and you'll find lots of information there. But great, I love this research because it gets us to talk about it, and it's not just about first-time buyers, it's about everybody involved with that person trying to buy that first property, and also knowing your role and responsibility in that as well. So yeah, fascinating subject, Jim, and thank you so much for giving me such a good conversation on it.
No, it's been brilliant speaking to you, and I'll certainly check out the research myself, and obviously yourself, Saira. You've got a strong, resilient mindset, to be fair, and but I think that's half the battle for a lot of people. That but everyone's on their own journey, so it is what it is.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jim. Take care.
Bye bye.